Smoke covered the red sky, turning daylight into a dull gray. The battlefield stretched for miles, littered with broken machines, fallen soldiers, and silent cries that still hung in the air. The ground trembled every few seconds from explosions far away. Yet here, in this valley of death, there was only silence now. Captain Elias Rourke moved slowly between the bodies. His boots sinking in the mud, he was a human medic. One of the few still alive after the 4th day of fighting. His hands were trembling. His face streaked with soot and blood, not all of it his own. The transmitter on his shoulder hissed static. No voices answered anymore. He called again for survivors, but only the wind replied. Carrying the smell of iron and burned soil, Elias had been trained to save lives, not watch them vanish. He knelt beside a fallen soldier, checked for a pulse, then sighed when there was none everywhere he looked. The world looked like it had already ended. The Virith Empire had sent waves of their warriors against the humans, and both sides had bled dry. Now he thought maybe the war was over, only no one left to tell it. As he turned to move toward a ridge, he heard it, a faint sound, soft, broken, almost a whisper. At first he thought it was the wind again, but then it came clearer. A voice, calling weakly for help. Elias froze, his instincts taking over. He looked around and followed the sound through the haze, crawling over twisted armor and smoking wrecks. The voice came from beneath a fallen Virith walker, a massive machine that lay crushed in the mud. He found a narrow space under the wreckage, and there she was, a wounded alien warrior. Her body half buried in ash, her armor shimmered faintly, cracked and glowing from deep wounds. Her skin was silver like moonlight, her hair braided with thin wires that flickered dimly. In her hand she held a long spear that pulsed with faint light, as if it were alive. Her eyes opened slightly when she saw him, glowing blue even through the pain. Elias crouched beside her, unsure what to do. He knew what she was, a Virith, one of the enemies who had slaughtered his squad, yet she looked fragile, dying. He raised his weapon, his finger trembling on the trigger, but then he saw her wound deep across her chest. Bleeding dark silver blood, she wasn't a threat anymore. She was barely breathing. His heart told him to walk away, but his training whispered otherwise. He sighed and threw his gun aside. Kneeling beside her, "Stay still," he said quietly, pulling a med patch from his belt. She watched him with confusion, her voice barely audible. "You, human, why?" "Because I'm a medic," he answered, pressing the patch to her wound. "I don't choose who to save." Her lips curved into a weak smile, a painful one. "Even your enemies?" Elias didn't answer. He just worked, sealing the bleeding as best he could. He didn't know why he was helping her, but something about her eyes made him feel she had seen the same loss he had. When he tried to lift the heavy debris off her, she gasped in pain. Her fingers gripped his wrist tightly, stronger than he expected. She pulled him closer, her voice shaking. "Touch my spear," she whispered, her eyes wide and strange. "Touch my spear and live." Elias frowned. Thinking she was delirious, he tried to pull back, but her grip tightened again, desperate. Her gaze softened suddenly, and she whispered, "Please," before her body went limp. The spear beside her began to glow brighter. Humming softly, Elias stared at it, breathing hard. The battlefield was silent again, except for that sound, a low, steady vibration that echoed through the ground. His own heart began to race, his breath shallow. Something about the weapon called to him, like a whisper in his mind that wasn't in any language he knew. He looked at the woman. She was still, her chest barely rising. Her eyes closed. Maybe she was dying. Maybe she was already gone. He reached out slowly, his hand trembling in the dust. The closer he got, the stronger the hum became, the air around him shimmering like heat. When his fingers brushed the shaft of the spear, a spark leapt into his palm, burning but not hurting. The world around him flashed white for a moment. He wasn't on the battlefield anymore. He was standing in a hall of light, surrounded by warriors with glowing eyes. They whispered words he couldn't understand. Then it all vanished, and he was back, gasping for air. Elias looked down at his arm. His wounds were gone. The blood, the cuts, the bruises, all healed. He looked at the spear again, now silent. The glow fading slowly, and then he looked at her breathing slower, her skin turning pale silver. He didn't know what had just happened, only that something had changed forever. He was alive and she was dying. And far in the distance, under the smoky sky, drums of the Virith army began to echo again. The battlefield that wouldn't end had just found a new beginning. and Elias didn't yet know it was written in her eyes. And her dying whisper. When Elias opened his eyes, the world was no longer quiet. He could hear every heartbeat, every whisper of wind through the ashes, every drop of blood that fell from broken armor. The ground pulsed beneath him, alive and trembling. He looked down at his hands. They were glowing faintly with the same light that had come from the alien's spear. He felt no pain, no exhaustion, only energy, pure and wild, flowing through his veins like lightning. The woman beside him stirred weakly, her eyelids fluttering. Her silver skin had lost its shine. Her breath shallow and slow, her fingers twitched. Reaching for the spear that now hummed quietly beside him, Elias placed it back in her hand. But the glow stayed within him. When their fingers brushed, he saw something. Flashes of memories that weren't his. A golden city under twin suns. Warriors kneeling before a woman with that same spear. A promise spoken in an ancient tongue and a war that broke the sky. He gasped and pulled his hand back, shaking. The vision faded, leaving him breathless and afraid. The alien woman opened her eyes and whispered, "You touched it?" Her voice was faint, but her eyes burned bright again. "You shouldn't be alive." Elias looked at her, confused. "You told me to touch it," he said softly. Her gaze softened, and for a second pain flickered through it. Not just physical, but something deeper. "The spear," she said. "Struggling for air, takes life to give life. It heals one by taking another." Elias felt cold run down his spine. He looked at her wounds. They were worse now, spreading like cracks in glass. "No," he said quickly. "No, I'll get help. I can fix this," but she smiled sadly. "You already did." In the distance, the sound of engines filled the air. Elias turned and saw dark shapes cutting through the smoke. Vireth flyers scanning the battlefield for survivors. The woman's eyes went wide, panic flashing in them. "Hide the spear," she whispered. "If they see it with you, they'll kill you slowly." Elias didn't understand. But the fear in her voice made him act. He lifted the weapon, feeling its weight. It was lighter than it looked, almost weightless when he wrapped his hand around it. The ground beneath him rippled with faint blue light. He dropped it in shock and the energy vanished. The alien woman weakly shook her head. "It's bound to you now, human." "It chose you?" Elias didn't know what that meant. And he didn't have time to ask. The flyers were landing nearby, and loud alien voices echoed through the smoke. He could see their armor glowing through the dust. Moving in formation, searching, he knelt beside her. "Can you walk?" She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. Her eyes closed briefly, and she whispered, "Leave me." "Take the spear and run." He shook his head. "I'm not leaving anyone behind." She almost smiled. "Humans," she muttered, as if it was a word of both wonder and sorrow. He pulled her arm over his shoulder and lifted her. Her armor was heavier than his entire pack, yet somehow, the strange power inside him made it possible. Each step felt unreal, every movement guided by something unseen. The spear hummed again as if alive, glowing faintly whenever danger was near. The Vireth soldiers were closing in, their scanners sweeping the ruins. Elias hid behind the wreckage of a destroyed hover tank. Trying to catch his breath, he looked down at the woman. Her eyes were half open. Her lips pale, she murmured words in her language, too soft to understand. And then she said in broken English, "If they find us, you die first." "Thanks for the encouragement," Elias whispered back. Trying to smile, then he heard footsteps close, too close. A Vireth soldier stepped over the wreck, scanning with a red beam. Elias grabbed the spear without thinking. The world exploded in light again. The beam hit him squarely, but instead of burning, it scattered into blue sparks. The alien screamed in confusion. His weapon melting in his hands, Elias swung the spear, and the air itself seemed to move with him. The ground cracked, throwing the soldier backward like a doll. Elias stood frozen, staring at his hands. He hadn't meant to attack, it just happened. The woman looked at him, eyes wide. "You wield it already," she whispered, disbelief in her voice. He turned to her, still shaking. "What is this thing?" She smiled weakly. "A curse or a miracle? It depends on the heart that carries it." He wanted to ask more, but the sounds of shouting filled the air again. More soldiers were coming. Elias picked her up again and started moving toward the mountains beyond the smoke. Behind him, the battlefield still glowed with faint traces of blue light, marking his path like ghostly fire. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, he found an old trench to rest in. The woman's breathing was shallow, Her strength fading fast, Elias sat beside her, the spear across his knees. It pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. Syncing with his own, he looked at her. At the strange warrior who had saved his life by giving up hers. Who are you? He asked softly, her eyes opened slightly. Her voice barely above a whisper. Serenia, she said. Guardian of the Spear of Life. She reached up, touching his cheek gently. And now? Its new bearer. Elias didn't speak, didn't move. The night grew darker, and the last light from the spear faded into quiet silence. But in the stillness of the dead battlefield, he could feel it, the pulse of something ancient. Something watching him now. He didn't know it yet. But the war he had survived had only just begun, and the power inside him, the one that kept him alive, was slowly killing her, one heartbeat at a time. The morning came with red skies and a cold wind that smelled like burned stone. Elias sat beside a dying fire, his back against a broken wall of the old trench. The spear lay across his lap, quiet for now, its glow hidden like a sleeping storm. Serenia lay beside him, wrapped in a torn blanket, barely breathing. Her silver skin looked dull, like the color was draining from her. Elias kept checking her pulse, hoping each time that it hadn't faded more. He hadn't slept all night. His body wanted rest, but his mind stayed awake. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the memory, how the enemy soldier's weapon had shattered against his skin, how the ground cracked when he moved, how his own hands glowed with power when holding the spear. It wasn't normal, it wasn't human. Whatever had happened between him and Serenia, it had changed him. As the sun rose, Elias noticed shapes in the sky, small dots flying in perfect circles. Scouts Virith drones scanning for survivors. He cursed under his breath. The spear might have saved him once, but it also made him a target now, and they were hunting for it. He was sure of that. Not for him, but for the weapon. Serenia stirred, her voice barely more than breath. They know. They'll come. Elias leaned closer. Who? Who's coming? She opened her eyes weakly. The High Talons. Elite Virith. Sworn to protect the spear. Sworn to kill the unworthy. Elias swallowed hard. And I'm what, an accident? She didn't answer, just looked at the spear, then at him. You are alive because it allowed it. Then she closed her eyes again. Too weak to speak, Elias didn't wait. He packed what little gear he had, strapped Serenia to a makeshift sled using a sheet of armor plating. He pulled her across rocky ground, heading for the black mountains in the distance. He didn't know the terrain, didn't know where safety was. All he knew was that staying here meant death, for both of them. As he walked, he spoke to her softly, trying to keep her awake. Told my brother I'd never fight again, he said. And now look at me. Her lips moved slightly. You fight with life, not death. That's rare. Midday came with more trouble. He heard at first the strange humming sound in the air. Not drones, worse, drop skiffs fast-moving. Low-flying transport ships designed to land squads silently. Elias dragged the sled behind a cliff edge, hid under thick vines and stone. He covered Serenia as best he could, then crouched with the spear held close. The skiffs landed nearby, and figures in dark armor stepped out. These weren't regular soldiers. Their armor shined with blue marks, their helmets horned like beasts. They moved in silence, scanning the ground with devices, sniffing the air like hounds. Then one of them stopped, turned. He pointed at the cliff where Elias hid. Elias didn't move, didn't breathe. One of the armored soldiers stepped closer, his scanner glowing red. He looked straight at the rock Elias was hiding behind, then suddenly stopped, tilted his head. Elias tightened his grip on the spear. One move, and the whole squad would be on him. The soldier raised a hand, then the scanner flickered, the glow vanished. The soldier frowned and smacked the device, confused. Then another soldier barked something in their alien tongue. The first one nodded and turned away, walking back to the skiff. Elias stayed frozen until the skiffs lifted off and vanished over the ridge. He finally exhaled, his chest aching. The spear had done something again, blocked the signal maybe, or cloaked him, whatever it was, it had saved them. But Elias felt no joy. He looked at Serenia. She was pale, her lips blue. Hang on, he whispered. Just a little more. They reached the edge of the Black Mountains by nightfall. Elias found a cave, small, hidden behind a wall of vines and roots. Inside it was dry and quiet. He laid Serenia down, built a small fire, and tried to warm her. He gave her water drop by drop. The spear rested near her, pulsing faintly. She opened her eyes just once and whispered, "The spear, Feeds on the bond, Elias asked what she meant. She only said, "The more it heals you, the more it takes from me," and then she slept again. Elias sat there staring at the fire. He hated it. The spear. The war, the silence, he had saved her. And now the weapon that gave him life was killing her. He picked it up and looked into the patterns along its surface. Symbols danced like they were alive, he whispered. "Is this your price? One life for another?" The spear said nothing. But the cave grew warmer, as if something ancient was listening. Outside, the sky was full of stars, but in the darkness below, the Vereth talons moved. They had seen the signs. They had heard the whisper, and they would not stop until the spear was back in their hands. Elias had no army, no map, and no plan, but he had the spear, and the last guardian of its light, and soon they would come face to face with death again. Only this time the hunter had become the prey. The path into the Black Mountains was steep and cold. Sharp rocks cut at Elias's hands as he pulled Serenya's sled higher. Inch by inch the wind howled through narrow passes like ghost voices. Snow fell softly, not thick enough to blind, but just enough to sting. He didn't know why he kept moving forward. Only that the spear kept glowing faintly, always pointing toward something he couldn't see. A feeling deep in his chest told him the answers were close, so he climbed. Even when his legs ached and his breath turned to ice by nightfall, he reached a plateau hidden behind a jagged stone wall. There it stood, half buried in ice and shadow, an ancient temple carved into the mountain itself. It wasn't built by humans, that much was clear. The entrance was a massive arch with symbols glowing in soft blue light. At the center of the arch was a spear carved in stone, the same shape as the one he carried. Elias pulled Serenya inside, the warmth surprising him. The moment they crossed the threshold, the air changed. It was warmer still, filled with the smell of dust and old memories. Strange orbs of light floated from the walls, lighting the path deeper inside. The spear in his hand pulsed once, then grew still as if it had come home. The temple hall was long and quiet. The walls were covered in carvings, some of war, some of peace, and many of sacrifice. He saw images of warriors falling in battle, only to rise again with glowing eyes. He saw one figure again and again, a woman with a shining spear. Leading armies, healing the dying. He stopped, his breath catching. The face was the same as the woman he had carried all this way. Serena, she hadn't lied. She truly was a guardian. Maybe more. At the end of the hall stood a round chamber filled with blue mist. In the center was a raised platform, and above it, a swirling orb of energy suspended in the air. Elias laid Serena down gently at the base. Her breathing was thin now. "Almost gone, please," he whispered. "I brought her here. Help her." The chamber didn't answer, but the orb above began to spin faster. Symbols lit up on the walls, and the spear in his hand floated up, pulled by some invisible force. Elias watched in awe as the spear hovered in the center of the chamber. A beam of light shot down from the orb, striking the spear. Then it split into two streams, one toward him, one toward Serena. He felt warmth rush into him, his body surging with strength, but Serena, she arched in pain, gasping. Her eyes opened wide, and for the first time they were afraid. "It's taking too much," she whispered. "It knows I'm too weak," Elias shouted. "Stop it." But the chamber didn't listen. He tried to pull the spear back, but it was frozen in the beam. Serena's body started glowing. Her veins lit up like stars. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she looked at him. Every guardian gave their life. "To protect this," she said. "Now it's my turn." "No," Elias cried. "You said it chose me. Why does it have to kill you too?" Serena smiled, though her lips trembled. "It always takes one life to protect another," she whispered. "The bond must stay balanced." She lifted a shaking hand toward his face. "I saw your heart when you healed me. I believed you were the one who could carry it without turning cruel." Elias held her hand tightly, refusing to let go. "You didn't save me just to die now," he said. "We can break this, together." Then the orb above them stopped spinning. The light dimmed, and the spear slowly lowered itself back into Elias's hands. Serena collapsed against him, barely conscious. But something had changed. He could feel it. The power inside the spear was quieter now, not greedy, not pulling. He realized she had given something more than just life. She had shared her bond, split it, not ended it. The chamber walls began to pulse with soft light. A voice echoed around them, not from a mouth but from the air itself. 2 hearts. One burden, it said, chosen by sacrifice, bound by trust. Elias looked down at Serenia, who blinked slowly, alive. But Dim, he didn't speak, just nodded to the voice. Whatever ancient force ruled this temple, it had watched them, tested them, and now it had judged them worthy. But peace did not last long. From outside the temple, a deep horn blasted through the mountain wind. Elias's blood ran cold. He knew that sound. Virith High Talon war drums. They had found him, and now they were coming. The temple began to shake slightly, dust falling from the ceiling. Serenia coughed, her voice raspy. They'll destroy this place. They want the spear. Not the truth. Elias stood slowly, gripping the weapon tightly. He looked at the walls one last time, the stories of sacrifice, hope, and endless war. Then he turned to Serenia, lifted her once more, and walked out of the chamber with fire in his heart. He was no longer just carrying a dying warrior. He was carrying the last memory of a forgotten world. And this time he wasn't running anymore. The temple doors slammed shut behind Elias, echoing like thunder across the cold mountains. Snow whipped around him as the wind grew stronger, carrying the low rumble of alien war drums. In his arms, Serenia stirred, her body still weak but her eyes open. Barely, she whispered. They've brought the High Talons. Elias set her down beside a tall rock, shielding her from the freezing gusts. What are they? He asked, clutching the spear tighter. Her voice was faint but sharp. They're the old ones, loyal only to the throne, and to the spear. Down below, the valley glowed with dark blue lights. Virith skiffs descended in formation, their hulls etched with symbols Elias had seen in the temple. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They moved like shadows, no shouting, no chaos, just quiet, perfect discipline. At their center marched a figure in massive armor. Twice the size of any warrior Elias had faced, it wore no helmet, revealing a face marked with glowing tattoos and deep scars. Its eyes locked on the temple ruins, unblinking. Serenia coughed blood and murmured, That's Commander Vorthan. He's never failed to retrieve the spear. Elias looked down at her, then at the weapon in his hand. The spear no longer glowed wildly. It pulsed gently, like it was waiting, not guiding him, not demanding anything, just ready. He stood tall, the wind tugging at his coat. He had no army, no plan, just a dying guardian, an ancient weapon, and a stubborn heart. Still, he stepped forward toward the edge of the cliff and shouted down into the snowstorm, You're not getting her! The voice that answered was deep, cold, and somehow everywhere at once. Then you will join the dead who thought they could defy the spear law. Elias didn't flinch. The snow below trembled as hundreds of soldiers began climbing the mountain path. They moved without pause, formation after formation, armored in black and silver. Elias knew he couldn't fight them all. Not even with the power in his hands, but he also knew he didn't have to. Not alone. He turned back to the temple door. He raised the spear and slammed it into the ground. A wave of blue light surged from the point of impact, rolling like thunder through the mountain. And from the cracks in the temple wall, something stirred. Figures began to rise from the earth. Shadows at first, then shapes. They glowed faintly. Their armor cracked but shining. They were Virith, humans, and other species Elias didn't recognize. Long-dead warriors bound to the spear's legacy. Ghosts of those who had once sworn to protect life, not take it. Their eyes glowed with the same soft blue as the spear's edge. They turned toward Elias, silent, waiting. He raised the weapon again and pointed it toward the oncoming army. Help me protect her, he said simply. The spirits didn't speak, but they moved, forming a circle around the mountain pass, their weapons drawn. The cold no longer mattered, the fear was gone. The past had come to fight beside him. The first wave of Virith troops arrived and were met with a wall of ancient fury. Ghost blades clashed with plasma rifles. Energy bolts passed through the spectral warriors, but they still struck back with deadly force. Elias ran into the fight, the spear in his hand lighting the snow beneath his feet. With every swing, the spear hummed, not with violence, but with purpose. It didn't just destroy, it purified. Virith soldiers collapsed, not wounded but stunned, as if their strength had been drained from the inside. Then Vorthan himself stepped into the battle. The snow melted around his feet. He swung a blade as long as Elias's body. Cleaving through spirit after spirit, he marched forward, unstoppable. You are no chosen one, Vorthan roared. You are a mistake. Elias met him head-on. Their weapons clashed. Sending shockwaves through the air, Elias stumbled back. The power in Vorthan's strikes too strong. But the spear responded, glowing brighter. Defending on its own, Elias moved faster than he should have, striking back with precision he never learned. Each time their weapons touched, the spear sang, an old song, one that made Vorthan's face twist in fear. "You shouldn't know that rhythm," Vorthan growled. "I don't," Elias replied. "She does." He glanced back at Sirenia, who was sitting now watching through the snow. Her hand was raised slightly, trembling but guiding. The bond was still alive. He was not fighting alone. With a final cry, Elias leapt forward, driving the spear into Vorthan's shoulder. The warlord screamed as his armor cracked and glowed. Blue light erupted from the wound, crawling across his chest like vines. He staggered, fell to one knee. The ghost warriors surrounded him, their eyes glowing like moons. Vorthan looked up at Elias, not with rage, but shame. "I protected this world, and we became its jailers," he whispered. Before falling still, the rest of the Virith troops froze. Weapons lowering, they looked around, saw the ancient warriors standing beside a human. They didn't understand, but they knew this battle was over one by one. They turned and vanished into the mist. Elias dropped to one knee, exhausted. The spirits faded into sparks floating into the sky. The mountain fell quiet once more, only the wind speaking now. He looked at Sirenia, who gave him the smallest smile. "You called them," she said. "No," he replied, breathing hard. "We did." And far below the mountain, in cities that had forgotten the old stories, something shifted. Because for the first time in 1,000 years, the spear had chosen not just a warrior, but a pair. The storm had passed, but silence was no comfort. Ash floated in the wind like slow snow, carried from the battlefield below. The once proud temple now had cracks running down its walls. The glowing carvings had dimmed as if the ancient place had exhaled its last breath. Elias stood on the cliff's edge, the spear heavy in his hands, not from weight, but from guilt. The fight was won, but the cost was only just beginning to show behind him. Sirenia leaned weakly against the cave wall. Her silver skin had turned a pale gray, almost colorless. Even her breath sounded different, thin, uneven, like each inhale took effort. The bond had saved him again, but it had taken more from her. Elias knelt beside her, placing the spear gently on the ground between them. "You're not healing anymore," he said. Even though he already knew the answer, Sirenia gave a small smile. "The kind that didn't reach her eyes, no," she whispered. "Because it's healing you." Elias looked down at his hands. There wasn't a single scar left. Wounds he'd taken hours ago were gone. His muscles stronger, his vision sharper. The spear had made him something more than human. But every heartbeat that kept him going was a heartbeat stolen from her. "How do we stop it?" he asked, voice low. "You can't," she replied softly. "The spear keeps balance. Life for life." He wanted to scream, but the mountain was too quiet. He wanted to break the spear, but it hummed softly, like it could hear his thoughts. Sirenia's eyes fluttered closed. "You weren't supposed to carry it alone," she whispered. "I was meant to train the next bearer. Teach them how to use it, how to carry the weight. But you didn't have time," Elias said bitterly. She nodded slowly. "The spear chose you because you reached out without wanting power, only to help." A tear slid down her cheek. "That's why it took me instead." The words hit Elias like a punch to the chest. He turned away, staring into the dark valley far below. Broken skiffs and scattered soldiers marked where the army had retreated. They weren't coming back. Not yet. But they would return with more, and when they did, Elias knew he wouldn't have her to guide him anymore. That night the wind fell still. Elias built a small fire inside the cave. Using broken equipment as fuel, he laid Sirenia beside it, her body shaking from the cold despite the heat. He wrapped her in every spare layer he had. She was fading, and he didn't know how to stop it. She stirred once more as the flames flickered against her face. "Elias," she whispered, "do you remember what the temple voice said?" He nodded. "Two hearts, one burden." She nodded weakly. "There's a way to give it back, or share it. Truly." He leaned closer. "Tell me how." She shook her head. "It has to be done at the shrine, deep beneath the temple, where the bond was first made." Elias looked back toward the cracked temple wall. The entrance had collapsed in the battle. Getting through wouldn't be easy, and there was no time. He clenched his fists. "Then I'll carry you." She opened her eyes again. "Barely, you'll die," she said gently. "The bond will take too much if you force it." "Then let it," he said. "I'd rather die than watch you fade away." The next morning, Elias began digging, with bare hands and the butt of his rifle. He cleared rocks from the temple's broken side. The spear pulsed beside him, As if encouraging or warning, it took hours. But he broke through inside. The temple's lower chamber still hummed with that soft blue glow. He carried Serenia down a spiral stairwell lined with ancient armor and forgotten relics. At the bottom was a circular room with a pool of glowing liquid at its center. Hovering above it was a smaller version of the spear, made of light, unmoving. "This is where it began," Serenia whispered. "Barely awake now. This is where the first bearer made the bond." Elias stepped into the chamber, the air thick with power. He set her down gently at the edge of the pool, then stood over her, the spear shaking in his hands. "Tell me what to do," he said. Serenia's lips moved, but her voice was too soft to hear. The spear lifted on its own, floating between them. Then something changed. A light from the pool reached out, touching both their chests. Their bodies rose slightly, suspended in the air. Elias felt his memories, his pain, his fear, his hope, rushing into her, and hers. Thousands of years of guardianship, of love and sacrifice flowed into him. The spear spun once between them, then split in two, not physically, but energetically when they landed again. Elias gasped for air. Serenia lay still, but then she breathed in, slow and deep. Color returned to her cheeks, her skin shimmered once more. The bond was no longer feeding from her. It was balanced. Shared. Elias smiled through tears. "You're okay," he whispered, and for the first time she smiled back fully. "So are you," but far above the mountain, far beyond the stars. A signal had been sent when the shrine activated. Something ancient had awakened, something that remembered the last time the spear had been split. And it was coming. Days passed, though Elias barely noticed time anymore. He and Serenia remained in the sacred shrine beneath the temple. The glow in the pool had faded now, dim and still, like a candle that had done its duty. They were alive, both of them, and for the first time since the battlefield, they were not running, not hiding, but peace came with a heavy silence. Elias stood at the mouth of the mountain cave, the spear resting across his shoulders. The world below looked different now. The war was still there, beyond the mountains. Cities burned, fleets gathered, but up here, in this ancient place of memory and sacrifice, something else stirred, something older than war, older than the empires that rose and fell across the stars. Behind him, Serenia stepped forward, walking slowly but stronger now. She wore her armor again, cracked but gleaming, and though she looked tired, her eyes held light. "You feel it too," she said. Stopping beside him, he nodded without answering. The spear pulsed in his hand, not with hunger, not with pain, but with awareness, like it knew the galaxy had felt its awakening, and now it was being watched that night, under a sky painted with unfamiliar constellations. Elias woke to a low hum. The spear glowed beside him, its light rising like a flare into the stars. Serenia sat up instantly, her face pale. "It's broadcasting," she said, "not a call." A challenge. Elias grabbed it. But the hum didn't stop. Instead, it focused, directing its beam straight into the sky. Stars flickered above, and then one blinked back. A single dark shape descended from orbit. No sound, no light, just presence. It wasn't a ship. It was too quiet, too smooth. It was a being, armored in flowing obsidian, with no face, no voice, only pressure. It hovered above the temple, watching, Serenia whispered. "It's the archivist." Elias turned to her. Confused, she spoke like someone reciting a legend. The one who created the first bond, who gave the spear its memory, who sealed it away after the last bearer fell. The being spoke, but not with sound. Its voice filled Elias's mind. "You have broken the balance." Elias Rourke, guardian by accident, bearer by mercy. Elias stepped forward, planting the spear into the earth. "I didn't ask for this," he said aloud. "But I'm not giving it back." The archivist's mind voice rumbled. "You split the bond. You kept her alive. You interfered with the law of life and death." Serenia stood beside him. Defiant, "We shared it," she said, "and still, we serve the purpose the spear was built for, to protect, to heal." The archivist hovered silently for a moment. Then it extended a hand, not to fight, but to reveal. A vision appeared in the sky above them. Elias saw galaxies burning, planets turned into weapons, and in the center of it all, a figure with a spear, not healing, not defending, but consuming. Every swing of the weapon drained life and fed its master. Serenia gasped. "A corrupted bearer." The archivist spoke again. "One bearer long ago twisted the bond, made it only serve him, and nearly ended everything. That is why the bond demands sacrifice. To keep power humble, you have bypassed the pain. You risk creating another tyrant. Elias felt rage rise in his chest. I'm not him, he said. I didn't steal this. I didn't demand it. I bled for it. I carried it through snow, through fire. I almost died for it. He looked at Serenia, and she gave everything to save me. We didn't cheat the bond. We honored it. Silence fell, heavy and sharp. Then the archivist lowered slowly. Its form dimming slightly, it reached out, touching the spear. The weapon lit up in a brilliant silver-blue flare, then divided. Two identical spears hovered between them now, both alive, both stable. The archivist's voice softened. Then let the bond evolve. As you have, guard life together. But know this, when you fall, the spear remembers. It always remembers. With that, the being vanished, rising back into the stars without a sound. Elias stared at the two spears. He took one, Serenia took the other. For a moment the wind paused, as if the mountain itself approved down in the valleys. Old scanners picked up something strange. A new signal, not of war, but of balance. The legend of the Guardian and the last spear was reborn, now told in twos. As the sun rose, Elias and Serenia walked down the path together. No longer fugitives, no longer dying, but chosen, not to fight for empires or carry pain alone, but to teach a new truth, that power without sacrifice is dangerous, but sacrifice shared becomes something stronger than war, something worth protecting, and somewhere far beyond stars, another spear woke up, sensing the change, and whispered to no one. Two hearts, one burden. Again,